strive for government, protecting our liberty.
Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your co-host for this evening's show. Joining me in co-hosting duties is my friend and also member of the Fitchburg Republican City Committee, former Mayor Dan Mylott. Thank you, Dan, for being with us tonight.
Mary, it's nice to be here, as always.
And Dan and I have a very special guest tonight. And as I introduce you, I am going to introduce you with your very formal name, because it is the formal name of how you will appear on our November's election ballot for U.S. candidate for House of Representatives. So your formal name on the ballot will be RoseAnn L. Earhardt Wofford, and you're from Haverhill, Mass.
Yes, I am.
Welcome, welcome, Ann. We're so pleased to have you with us, and we're proud to, as a woman, I especially am proud to have a woman challenging Congresswoman Nikki Tsongas for the U.S. House of Representatives, Mass 3rd District. I think this is wonderful.
You got that out pretty good, Mary, you know?
She made it through the name, so I was impressed, the whole name.
I had it written down. Ann, you like to have us call you Ann, so
Yes.
we will now, for the purpose of this evening, you're our friend. We've met you several times, and we will refer to you as Ann. But just for the sake of the electorate, your name will appear on the ballot in the more formal RoseAnn Earhardt Wofford.
Correct.
So let's get started. What I'd like you to talk about is a very interesting background you have. So if you could just give us a little nutshell of what
Sure.
you've been up to.
Well, I grew up in Western Massachusetts, right outside Springfield. Went to Cathedral High School in Springfield, and in my day that was a huge high school. I've actually met alumni in the 3rd District from
Yes.
Cathedral High School. Then I went to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where I majored in chemical engineering. And then I spent the next 17 years in private industry as a chemical engineer. I did have 2 maternity leaves during that time. And about 10 years ago, moved back to Massachusetts, to Haverhill. In the interim, I did spend 9 years in Texas, but as a chemical engineer, I mean, that's almost to be expected from a career path standpoint. So love Haverhill. It has been just a great city, and it was nice to come back to New England. So been there, and you're asking how did I go from chemical engineering to politics?
Now that's kind of a stretch, I do have to say.
A little bit of a stretch there, but not really, because you know the family household. I grew up in a Democratic household, like most folks in the 3rd District.
Yes.
I
You're
still remember in
looking
the
at one.
90s when my dad became a Republican, and my mom did not talk to him for 2 days. She could not believe she was married to a Republican, and I registered Democrat when I turned 18, and I was excited to do that. And when I moved to Texas, you actually just register to vote. You don't pick a party, which was nice. I liked that. So when I came back to Massachusetts 10 years ago, I was an independent, unenrolled, as Massachusetts calls it, unenrolled.
Sure, unenrolled.
And I like that. You can just always vote the person. You can go in a primary that you want to vote in, that you feel is contested, and you have a strong advocacy for someone. And watching politics over the past decade, this is a 2-party system across the country and in Massachusetts. And I felt about 3 years ago that if I ever wanted to do anything in politics, I needed to pick a side. And I am more center-right on all your issues, especially the financial issues. I'm very much a financial conservative. And so I went and I changed from an unenrolled or independent to Republican. So I have been a registered Republican now for about 3 years. And one of the things as I go through the 3rd District is the number of independents. Most folks vote the person. They really don't vote a party, they vote the person. And a lot of folks have had similar backgrounds where they've either been Republicans and now they're unenrolled, or they've been Democrats and now they're unenrolled. And it's just, you know, why have that?
Well, let me ask you then, because you said most people do vote the person, and
Yes.
especially unenrolled
Yes.
independents, they do vote
Yes.
the person. How do you now, as RoseAnn Earhardt Wofford, make people understand and recognize your name from a name in the 3rd Congressional District, especially up in the Lowell, Lawrence, Haverhill area,
Yes.
Chelmsford, that has been so well recognized, Nikki Tsongas. Everything up in Lowell is the Tsongas Arena, the Tsongas something. How do you all of a sudden introduce these people to not only a new idea, but a new name, a new face?
Well, part of it is I think people are fed up with the same old, same old. And I think in some ways having that recognized name that's been around for a while in established politics is going to be a detriment. But it is just getting out and meeting folks and talking with folks and just kind of being present. It's a big mileage-wise district.
It is.
But you know, getting out, everyone is great. I mean, it's just amazing the people you meet as you go through this district. And all of us are really facing right now the same basic issues. But these are issues that the voters are facing, not the folks in Washington. You know, there is definitely a political elite that has developed in this country. And my opponent is one of those members of the political elite. You know, when folks talk about gas prices and food prices and just the basic things you need to live and how much they've gone up and how much families are struggling, it's one thing to live it and be in the district. It's another thing to be in Washington, D.C., discussing amongst all your political class friends how you can help everyone. It's different when you yourself know how it can be helped. You know, I've worked in the private industry for 17 years, but for the past 2.5, I've been a stay-at-home mom, and I was fortunate I could do that with my husband's job, and our children were just smaller, and either I climbed the corporate ladder too fast, or we had children too late, or something, that we were able to step back. But I know, especially a lot of friends of mine that are nurses, where they would like to step back a little more, but they're working 3 shifts, because they have to work 3 shifts to make ends meet.
Right.
And it's not talking about working less shifts, it's when and where can I pick up a shift when I need that.
Right.
And that's the daily life. That's what we're seeing. And no matter how much you talk about it in that political elite, they're not living it. They don't understand it.
Do you think, as you look at some of the elections that we've recently had, we've been going through primary season, and just a bit ago there was the big Eric Cantor defeat by a relatively unknown by the name of Dave Bratt. Now granted, that was within the party itself, but we had that. We have Charlie Rangel, a Democrat from New York, 22 terms. He just squeaked by this last time in his own state of New York primary for U.S. Congress. Do you think those are emblematic of people's attitude about getting tired of Washington, tired of the incumbency, this 17% or lower approval rating that Congress tends to have? Can you capitalize on that? Do you think that's why some of these
That's part of it.
people are losing and
Yeah, if you've been in D.C. for 22 years, it's time to go home. You know, you're supposed to go and serve, but not be there 30 years. You know, at some point, you're no longer representing your district. I mean, I'm still going to be coaching the soccer team and doing the dance classes with my kids. I mean, I live here. This is where I'm going to be. But 30 years from now, in Congress, because I plan to win this fall, I would not still be there 30 years from now. You know, and I think there's this element of it's supposed to be of the people and for the people. And it's not anymore. It's of this political class for this political class. And I think you're definitely getting this I'm fed up. You know, the unfortunate thing is I do also meet folks who seem to have given up. And we cannot give up. We have to go out and vote. It is so important this November to get out there and vote for the change and bringing this country back to a government of the people.
Dan, would you like to ask Ann?
Well, I'd like to continue that
Oh,
discussion
okay.
a little bit. As a former mayor, I had to discuss things with the congressman all the time. And I had a congressman who didn't particularly like me because I was a Republican and he wasn't. How are you going to deal with all these mayors in your district who are all Democrats and be successful in doing the job of a congressman and getting the support you need from them as you try to do that work?
Well, I live in the city of Haverhill.
Yes, you
So, and Haverhill has kind of been going through what folks keep calling a renaissance. So I know I've seen where they've gotten state aid, federal aid. You do need assistance with the cities, especially with some of our cities that are still struggling, such as Lawrence and Fitchburg. And at the local level, I'm not so sure the party really matters. It's again the person, and are they looking out for the folks in their city? And as the congresswoman, I'm looking out for the folks in the cities as well, in the suburbs, everyone in here. We all help each other out. To me, if you're doing a good job as mayor, I'm going to help you do a good job, and I'm going to help your city thrive.
Well, that's very good. I think that's very important. I think one of the problems that we have is dealing with one of the agencies in Washington, which is very onerous to every city and town in the Commonwealth, and that's the EPA.
Yep.
So how are you going to alleviate that problem from cities like Fitchburg, who are right now going through a water and sewer expansion, which is really going to very, and over the long run will hurt the city very badly. It's been going on for 20 years. It's not something that just happened, except it's now been imposed.
Well, Fitchburg has a consent decree, right,
Oh,
against it
yes,
for the,
yeah.
right. And in Haverhill, we're going through it too. I know I read in one of the articles that the EPA considered a normal water bill like $2,300 a year. Okay, that's going to triple my water and sewage bill. That is not a normal one, not for this area of the country. I don't know where they're coming from. And again, they're all in DC talking amongst themselves.
That's
and,
right.
Sure.
That's
you know,
exactly right.
Advocate. I can definitely advocate for folks, and we have to make sure that these things, yes, they do need to be done. I do agree we don't want sewage running into the Merrimack River or the Nashua River or any of the rivers in the district. But you also have to take into account what people can afford. Now, there are state grants and there are federal grants, and there's federal money out there, and that would be one of the big things I'd be advocating for is this regulation, you know, unfunded mandate, again,
That's what
does not
Washington continues to impose on us.
It does not impact every part of the country the same way. And we have the older cities, the older towns that when these sewer systems were built, they were adequate, you know, for the time. But they've grown, and our expectations on how we manage our rivers has grown as well. So if we're going to be doing these, we have to make sure we can help our cities fund these, because these are truly public works things. And that's where the federal government can come in and advocate and help and support from some of those financial grants.
You are right about that, but the bigger problem is that the EPA deals in coercion, and they withhold money from projects that it's not what they want. And consent decrees are done the same way. It's all done through coercion. If you don't sign this consent decree, we're going to start fining you.
So much a
so it's
day.
no longer a consent decree. It's an order that you're being forced to sign.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened here. It was what I went through when I was mayor. It was what the mayor before me went through, all on the same projects, the same water and sewer projects.
Well,
And it gets very onerous because the city can't afford that.
And that was one of the things that I think we went through, because it was just 2 years ago that we were imposed with this large water sewer separation project. And what we saw was that through the years, these projects had been worked on routinely. Money was budgeted for it. They were working towards a long-term goal. And then all of a sudden, the EPA comes in and says, you will do it, and you will do it now, and it will be completed by the year.
And
Blah,
they
blah.
only did it to Fitchburg,
And-
right. They picked a city to scare the rest of them, is what they did.
And they have done it in other cities, you know.
But they spot.
But
They spot.
Unfortunately, in the Commonwealth has been chosen as the place that they've picked to impose this stuff. So other states will have to fall in line.
Well, keep in mind in the chemical industry, I was actually in a company that was under an FDA consent decree and help the company, as my job, get out and alleviate that through a lot of good work, a lot of hard effort, a lot of folks. Knowing the systems, knowing how these regulatory agencies work, I can help out and advocate for the cities on how they need to make sure they're meeting milestones and to help try to get that funding so they can meet that. And that is where your congresswoman can help you. You know, what can you do at the federal level? That's where it can help, and navigate, and the milestones, and know what's coming up, because it's a lengthy consent decree. You know, even without all the attachments, which brought it to like 300 pages. You know, so knowing
I
the
do.
milestones, seeing the planning, seeing the project work, you know when you're going to need the help, and you know where you're going to need that assistance from the money, so you're not putting it off on all your taxpayers with all your rates, because $2,300 a year is not, you know, the routine wastewater bill.
Right.
That's just not.
Just to let you know, the bills were so onerous in Fitchburg that we were always billed quarterly. But people were getting in bills that were so high that they went to a monthly billing, just so people wouldn't get this bill and sort of pass
Right,
away.
and Haverhill's still quarterly, but I mean, I don't ever want the rest of the district to have to go through what Fitchburg has had to go through.
Let's pivot a little bit off that topic and talk about strategies for winning. Many congressional candidates in your position have said, oh, it's Obamacare. It begins with Obamacare and it ends with Obamacare. Now, of course, Obamacare and the whole Massachusetts rollout was an embarrassing thing. We're still paying millions and millions of dollars to get Obamacare online in Massachusetts. We're still not there. We're paying for people to go to outside doctors. I mean, it's just beyond a scandal. However, as you look towards winning, is it all going to be focused on Obamacare, or are there other strategies that you need to work on to draw in maybe more people and to bring more people into this conversation, not just those concerned with health care?
Well, I think small businesses are very concerned with this mandated health care and what you're required to cover and the cost on that. So that is a major issue for small businesses. And keep in mind, my dad had a small business growing up, so I've seen that. My brother does. I've seen that small business, my father-in-law did, and the impact on these things. So the two main ways at the federal level is to get the spending under control. Okay, nobody can afford to pay any more taxes. I don't know about you guys, but I can't. I don't think anybody can.
Thank you.
They've
Thank you
got
for
enough of our
understanding.
money, but they got to stop wasting it. And there is a lot of what I would call low-hanging fruit in Washington. And honestly, you do have the power of the budget. This is Congress's power. We need to get that fiscal house in order. And I think that resonates with everyone because you just see this massive waste and fraud going on in DC, and nobody here can get away with that with a small business. You would go out of business, right? We would lose our homes. These are things that cannot happen in the world we live in, not the world of Washington, DC. So it's to bring that back, that reason, we have to operate this within reason, this budget. So that is one of the main ways. The second way is the government overreach. Not just things directly here that we see, but you take a look at what the EPA is doing with the coal industry. All right, again, telling folks this is what you have to do. It's going to impact all of us on our energy bills. All right, so there's this overreach, and hopefully start to push, bring them back. Bring them back to only doing what they're supposed to be doing, and Congress does have that power. All right, so they no longer cede it to these executive agencies. The other thing really too, if you talk about the government overreach and you talk about the fiscal waste that's going on in Washington, D.C., when we look at this, you've got Obamacare. I'm thinking those are really the two main ways that really at the federal level, two main issues that impact everyone. It's the taxes and it's the regulation. Common Core is another one. All right, kind of in general, I don't like the government telling any of us what to do, and I don't like the government wasting our money. You take something like Common Core or the Affordable Care Act, government's telling us what to do, we have less choice, we have less freedom, and they're definitely wasting our money, So
Yes.
those are
Yes.
things that, of course, my opponent is on board with, and I believe feels are some of her greatest accomplishments is voting for these things.
How do you feel about it? Congresswoman Tsongas has frequently voted along party lines with President Obama, not only for the Affordable Care Act, but I mean in terms of almost everything. How do you feel about voting for your conscience? They all say, well, I'm voting for my conscience, I'm voting for the people, versus just voting for a party. I think there are people out there who feel that the Republicans just vote the other way just to be arbitrary.
Well, and I think that goes with the political class that has developed and how they work with each other. And we need more real people in Congress who are truly looking out for the folks in their district and their country. So it stays the greatest country in the world. This decline is a choice, and I'm not going to make that choice. When you say party lines, it's going to be what's best for the district and what's best for the country. That is honestly going to be it. Go back to the founding principles and work with reason, not the emotion that likes to get tossed in there, but work with reason. So, and I just think that chemical engineering background maybe is why it's the reason. Where are you being led? Where's it going? So.
I think Charles Krauthammer oftentimes will say, because of his, of course, being a physician, he says, with a scientific background, you always want things that are provable. You don't go,
Yes.
it's not feelings, it's not emotions. You want things that have been demonstrated to be provable, and they're therefore successful.
Well, and that's, I think, why the Affordable Care Act so outrageous, makes me upset, is we had this in Massachusetts. And honestly, if you were going to try this in a state, this was a good state to pick. You have a nice large city like Boston, you have your more rural communities. I don't think anyone ever did their due diligence on what has really happened to healthcare in Massachusetts with what's been deemed the Romney Care and how that has impacted small businesses. Before it went national, it wasn't proven, there wasn't enough time. What did the state legislature do with it? How did the stimulus money that came into the state impact that and maybe skew some of those numbers? That I think if folks had really looked at Massachusetts instead of just this great idea, it wouldn't have passed. And of course, it was such a divisive passing anyhow, you know, and whenever that happens in this country, you know, you have to have both parties agree to have something work.
It never straightens itself out.
Right, it's not going to. This is going to be continual unrest until, honestly, we take care of what really needs to be done and address this together.
The other issue that you mentioned just a minute ago was Common Core.
Yes.
Common Core is not good for Massachusetts because we had a system that was better than Common Core, and we had to, you know, bring ourselves away from our system. How do you deal with that kind of impact that it's going to have on our school systems?
I think I'm hearing different school committees are saying right now we're going to just stick with the MCAS test, you know, because there's this transition period, and really this really is going to be fought back at the local level in our school committees and our parents saying this is ridiculous. Whatever study you look at on education, this is one of the great places to bring your children is for education. Massachusetts is always right up there. If it's not number one, it's right up there. Why would we ever want to be forced to do something that's going to bring us down? You know, if they wanted the rest of the country to do what Massachusetts does, well, that's one thing. But that's not what they're asking. And again, to me, that's bringing the government in and telling us what to do. And I'm just opposed to that. We need to decide ourselves.
I don't think they're going to let us decide that for ourselves.
We still can.
For a year we do, but
We can always, that's the wonderful thing about legislation. You can legislate again.
hopefully.
Yep.
The Democrats last election went after this concept of the war on women. Now we're going to have two women challenging
Yes.
each other. Where do you, obviously, my guess, my assumption is that Ms. Tsongas believed that there was a war on women. Is there a war on women, and how do you go challenge a fellow woman in an election cycle?
I just think that as a chemical engineer, you always kind of heard, to me, you need to do the job, and you need to do the job well. And I think in general, all women have the same basic concerns. They want their children to have a better life than they had, but they want their children to have at least the same opportunities that they had. And I think this war on women is only if you don't fit into this little bitty box that the government likes to always put people into. But see, that's our country is just not this little box. It's so diverse and so great and so beautiful that this war on women, it just, I don't get it. You know, you need to be able to make all your own choices.
And I imagine as a woman in the chemical engineering field, you were one of the minorities, certainly in that field. I just don't think it's rich with women.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I'd cringe when somebody would make a comment, oh, it's because you're a woman. I would just cringe. To me, it's what you do yourself. You know, you're judged for who you are and what you have accomplished. So, and I've got a lot of that here. Well, it's a woman against a woman. And I'm like, well, that's great. If you just look at it in general, that is great that you have two women competing to represent this district in the House of Representatives. And I think that's how that should just be taken.
I'm very proud of it. I think it's a wonderful thing to see.
It
two
is.
strong women.
You know, no matter what, a woman is going to represent this district.
Well, and I think what it is it says that women aren't running in lockstep. We don't walk in lockstep. We do have divergent opinions and ideas.
And that's everybody.
And with this, we're going to wrap it up. Believe it or not, we told you it was very quick. It was a very quick half hour. But before we go, what I really want to do is allow you the opportunity to speak directly to the voters of the 3rd District and for any other district who wants to listen in, because what you have to say is very important to not only your own candidacy, but to others. So I'd like you to just face the camera and tell people what you want them to know about you.
Well, first I want to thank both of you for letting me come in
You're
and
welcome.
speak today and
Thank
try
you
to help
so
the
much.
voters get to know who I am. But I would also like to talk to the voter and say that I need your vote this November. My name on the ballot is RoseAnn L. Earhardt Wofford. I go by Ann. And I am a concerned citizen who does not believe my children will have the same opportunities that I had growing up if the government continues down its current path. This is supposed to be a government of, for, and by the people, but it's become a government of and for a political class. I live here, and I know what families are really facing. We have no more money to give the federal government. I live here, I will be here, and I will be working for you. Thank you.
Well, what do you think, Dan?
I think you did a pretty good job just then.
I think stunning in every way. You made a very righteous presentation of yourself and your candidacy, and with that, we just wish you just so much luck, and we will be with you many times in the future, I'm sure.
I'll be in Fitchburg a lot.
Yes, you
I
will.
hope so.
And
And next year also.
You betcha, yes, I will be.
Well, that's our show for this evening, and we'd like to thank you for watching Your Right to Know. While sitting in with us tonight, we'd also like to encourage you that if you have conservative ideals and principles, we'd like you to join any of your local town or city Republican committees, because they are the grassroots organizations that holds dear and supports your right to life, liberty, and your constitutional values. As we close tonight, we'd always like you to know that to us in Fitchburg, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity, and that we always stand for freedom. Thank you very much, and good night.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.